being an entrepreneur doesn't feel good all the time. It's not what it looks like on Instagram, even though I'm very conscientious as to not post any fake aspirational girl boss content. Anytime I see somebody on their computer in a bikini, I'm like, no, your computer's overheating and your tits are sweating. And if you've ever been in Europe trying to work remote there, find me on the floor of a bathroom looking for a Wi-Fi connection and having a meltdown. I've been there. It's fine. Welcome to Old Money, a show dedicated to helping you build the trust fund you wish you were born with. Ladies who lunch, listen up. Life is not about looking rich. I want you to build a life and a legacy that feels rich in every sense of the word. If you're ready to stack cash, talk shop, and trade insider secrets, you're in the right place. These are the new rules to Old Money, so let's get after it. Hello, rich girls. Welcome back to Old Money, the podcast to help you build the trust funds you wish you were born with. I'm your host and entrepreneur, Amber Frankusen. Welcome to part one of, I don't even know what, maybe 5, maybe 10 pieces of content of podcasts, all about girl bossing. Not too close to the sun. We're keeping it down to earth, but we are talking about entrepreneurship in such a meaningful way because I'm almost just remiss of having not touched on it enough so far. You know my story of figuring out my financial fight or flight, finally getting out of debt, calming my overspending, healing through all of that. But I needed to do all of that so that I could run a successful business. And running a business has exponentially grown my wealth in ways that I just can't even imagine. And we're talking about all of the modalities of wealth, not just what's in the bank account, but the lifestyle, the people, the relationships, the purpose. We're going to get into it. But before we do, it's been a while since we caught up. Let's kiki. How about a little birdie and bogey? If you don't play golf, it's okay, neither do I. A birdie is a score in golf when you get 1 stroke under par. That's good. And a bogey is 1 stroke over par, which is bad. So I'm just helping prime you for the country club with the vocabulary you need to look good on the links. So let's get into it. The highlight, the lowlight, the birdie, the bogey. The birdie was I got to go up to Silicon Valley and join the Tres Comas Club. Just kidding. I do not have $1 billion just yet. If you've watched that show, Silicon Valley on HBO, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, it is so worth a rewatch. And you guys, that is not just what Silicon Valley is like. It's not even as crazy as the show. Or how do I say that? The show is barely scratching the surface of how crazy people can be in Silicon Valley. But I was up there for business and I had a great time just being in the energy of people who are building stuff, striving, hustling, not even hustling. I feel like hustle is not the right word for Silicon Valley because most people are very intentional and thoughtful and philosophical, in my experience. But there's a sprint culture. If you've ever worked in software development, you might be familiar with this modality of working called sprinting, or it's the agile framework. But essentially what it is giving people time constraints in order to complete a set amount of work. And so there's this energy and this frenetic energy, almost like get it done within the sprint. And there's a lot of different components to that. This is not a project management podcast, but I'm just saying it's great to be around people who are working towards something. So while I was there, I accidentally wandered into an executive party for Meta. Oops, I was looking for the Zuck so that he could help solve all my Facebook problems. But it was the same day that I was there was the day they were doing that big Meta World or whatever they call it. It's kind of like, when Apple releases what's going on with the new iPhones. Well, they do that also, but virtually for Meta. And I stumbled into a after party for them, which was very interesting people. And, I was walking into dinner and there was a nice older gentleman in front of me. And let me look at my phone because I took a picture. Yeah, I was a stalker and I took a picture of what this guy was holding as we were walking into dinner. And he was holding a book behind his back because he was a solo diner and he was going to enjoy his dinner with a book like I did. I was reading Husbands and Lovers or something like that. This guy was reading The Power and the Money by Troy, and he had papers sticking out. I should post this on Instagram. He had papers sticking out of the book, like his notes and annotations. And it was just a reminder of you got to go where the mindset is and you got to be in the energy of the people that are thinking of those things. And I just found it so interesting and regenerative and exciting to be there and having the conversations that I did and being where I was. I can't get into too much detail about it, but it was just a lovely trip. But the bogey of that trip was meeting some women at a conference who were not so friendly. And I had this experience where we're at a conference, it's networking. This one was for real estate in particular, multifamily real estate, and investors were there, developers were there, architects were there, service providers were there. I'd be in the service provider category. And I sat down next to these women and asked them if I could join them, introduced myself, very Elaine Swan coded, if you've listened to that episode, and asked them questions about how they were doing, what they were there for, who they worked with. And when I tell you that these women wouldn't even body language towards me, like there was no opening of the chest and shoulders, there was no nothing. Another woman joined our group at one point, and she was very lovely and receptive to me. So that gave me a bit of hope that I wasn't like super stinky breath or offensive looking or something like that. But she was lovely. And then her and I kind of, started a side conversation. And the two women who I had joined originally, without saying, excuse us, we're going to go over here. We're going to excuse ourselves. Very nice to meet you. Hope you have a lovely day. Just got up and walked away. And it still blows my mind that people don't really understand that kind of common courtesy and social grace. And that is such a big part of business. My mother would be so disappointed in me if I was ever rude or didn't, include the new girl, so to speak. If you were one of those girls in elementary school, middle school, high school who was assigned by the teacher to be nice to the new girl and show them around, that was me. I mean, I think we get extra bonus aura points for doing that. Do you like how I put that cute little Gen Z talk in there? Anyway, I couldn't believe it. And it left such a sour taste in my mouth. And, especially when it's a real estate development conference, 90% of the people in that room are men. There were very few women. There were very few ethnicities in there, to be completely honest. And it made me think of one of the turning points in my career that actually inspired me to become an entrepreneur. And I'm going to get to it. We're going to get into it today. We're going to go all through, let's just call it my story, because I get questions all the time. How did you start your agency? How did you figure out what you were going to do in business? And how can I do it too? Now, I certainly don't have all the answers figured out. I'm still learning all the time and working with advisors and coaches and people much smarter than me to continue to learn how to grow my business. But I do believe that all of us have a duty to share information when it can help somebody else. And for me, starting a business has been the most transformative thing I've ever done in my life, whether it be financially, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, all of the things. They say, if you want to get into personal development, there is no faster shortcut to the growth than starting a business. But I also firmly believe, and I think I have said this before on the podcast, that starting anything will really be confronting and force you to grow, whether that's starting a business or starting a family or starting to become a mother or starting somewhere new in school. But when we're talking about business and money, remember this podcast is called Old Money, right? We're talking about generational wealth, which is the transfer of assets from one generation to the next. This is cash in the bank. This is your 401k. This is your real estate, your property, your investments, your businesses. And it's not just about starting a business so that you can have a job. It's about creating an asset that's bigger than yourself, that has inherent value that you can sell on the open market. Above and beyond all of the financial reasons, there are some pretty compelling reasons why some people would be attracted to entrepreneurship. So Dan Sullivan is this prolific business coach, success coach. I don't even know what to call him, but he basically writes every book I read. I don't know, like 10X is greater than 2X, all those different kinds of books. And he has this framework called the Freedom Framework. And he talks about these different levels of freedom that people seek when they're entering entrepreneurship. The first one is freedom of time. This is like bottom of the pyramid stuff. The first thing that people are usually looking for when they start a business is freedom of time. You want to spend your working life doing what you want to do. And you also want to have more flexibility and autonomy around your schedule so that you can have a real life, be a parent, be a partner, travel, do whatever. This to me also ties into that desire of the entrepreneurial nomad, the person who wants time and location freedom, that whole like travel the world and work from whatever type of a dream. That's never been me. I'm a Cancer. I'm a homebody. I want to be with my dog. But this freedom of time and having autonomy over your schedule is one of the first reasons why, according to him, people seek out new options. And you'll learn more about this when I get into my story about working in quote unquote corporate, but my time was never my own. And because my time wasn't my own, I was feeling really disenfranchised and controlled. And listen, your boss, your company is not trying to control you because they're a mean, evil person or corporation. It's because you have to work together with everybody else's schedule and the goals of the business. So freedom of time is one of the first reasons why people get that itch, but then they want freedom of money. Duh. You don't want a ceiling on how much money you can make for doing an incredible job and for getting a return on your effort. I had an amazing friend of mine who was at this company for such a long time. And we're talking about a huge company. She was always being recognized and speaking with the executives on the team from her position. She was volunteering for everything. She was managing a boatload of people. And then she told me that because of the time that she was hired, she was in a certain, call it like sector of people who would never advance beyond making $100,000 a year, no matter the tenure, no matter the contribution. But because of the time she was hired and the division she was in, she was capped. And I blew a gasket for her because that's crazy. And it's also super demotivating. And so that person made a concerted effort to not give as much, because if you know there's a limit on how much that you can contribute, why would you really dedicate and strive to growing within the company? I find that to be absolutely crazy. And one of the reasons why that person is now also pursuing entrepreneurship. The third reason why on Dan Sullivan's freedom matrix, freedom framework, whatever you want to call it, is freedom of relationships. I could probably count them on one hand, probably two, if we're being honest. There's some people out there that I wouldn't want to work with. And the fact that I can say I don't have to work with them is the biggest blessing of my life. And I'm talking about clients, bosses, coworkers, whatever. You know the type. You know that person that when you think about your like arch nemesis in work, you're like, I would be happy if I never had to see that person or deal with that person again. When you're an entrepreneur, you can choose not to work with certain people. You do get that power. And the fourth level on this pyramid of the freedom framework is the freedom of purpose. When you create something like a company, it's not just a job or a career, it's a vehicle to do everything that you're set out to do on this planet in this meat suit. You get a tremendous sense of purpose because if you're creating your company, you're creating your destiny, and it puts you back in the driver's seat of owning what you're building. So there's no more like, I just have to pay the bills. I'm a plumber. I don't want to be a plumber. And it changes the whole framework to if I get to choose what I'm going to do, what I'm going to build. I don't like plumbing, but I love electrical. I'm going to be the best electrician and I am going to give power to people's homes and make sure that it's wired well for blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to create generational wealth for my family. I'm going to create jobs for my friends. I'm going to give these people opportunities and I'm going to be the best damn electrician in my town. You all of a sudden get the contributor of time, of money, of relationships, of opportunities, of the capability to contribute to your community, to do things that for you have more purpose. And it's kind of like, when you talk about these old money families and you're like, what do they do all day long? And a lot of them are very interested in community work or philanthropy or volunteering. They have a purpose of something that's bigger to them. Maybe they're a patron of the arts or the zoo or a special charity, or like me, when I'm retired, I'm going to be a patron of the chow chows. Like that's what I care about. I want to rescue all the fluffy dogs in the world because they get a bad rap and people don't give them a fair shot. And you get to this place where once you have all of these other things fulfilled, you have enough money, like what is your purpose? What is the thing you're sent to do on this planet? You actually can effectuate that through your work as an entrepreneur. And for me, that's been it's been such a revelation because all I wanted to do was bring interesting art to the business world. In real estate, we see so many of the same names, same brands, same look, same this, same that. And it was just all watered down because everybody's afraid to do something edgy or interesting. And I said, I want to do something edgy and interesting. And that's what we're doing. We're always pushing the envelope with AF marketing. And now I get to create art and work with my artists and give them a facility in which, and I don't mean like a physical facility, but like, parameters in which to work. And I can pay artists to do great work. It's honestly a joy. And with Old Money is my passion project. It's exactly what I love to talk about. It's lifestyle, it's money, it's finance, it's living well, it's generational wealth. It's connecting with all of you because I have my company and now I have freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship. I can do this. Old Money. It's my freedom of purpose. But before I get into all of my story and how I got here, I do think it's important to mention that I do not believe that entrepreneurship is for everyone. Like, I don't know if you know what's going on, but Chappell Roan is not meant to be an entrepreneur. And I have a lot of thoughts about this. So if you're not familiar with Chappell Roan, who is this summer's like newest pop diva, alongside Sabrina Carpenter and Charlie XCX, we are having a pop resurgence, which just feels lovely. And maybe today, as I'm recording this on Monday, September 30th, I don't know the entire story and I might eat my words, but what she has shared with us, what she shared with the public so far, Chappell Roan, is that she is overwhelmed by her success. And again, if you're not familiar with the story, Chappell Roan's basically exploded this summer. She's had a ton of huge hits, and she has just again canceled more shows just days before she was set to perform at a huge festival headlining. And she went to her social media again and said something along the lines of, I'm overwhelmed. I need to take some time off to take care of myself and take care of my headspace. And this is not me coming on here to clap back at mental health. Like we see the Naomi Osakas of the world or Simone Biles with her twisties. Like I'm not criticizing people who take time off for mental health. I took some time away as much as I could earlier this year for my mental health. But it is the audacity to get yourself involved in speaking on every little thing that happens, getting a bunch of backlash, having to come back on social media and defend yourself, stirring up all of this drama and publicity, and continuing to come to the media to complain about how hard it is to be a celebrity. And just all of this vitriol, this hate. Did you see her yelling at that photographer at VMAs? Like she has some fire in her for sure. But here's the thing. And John Summit, who is a very popular DJ right now, he came out and said, you know what? Every job has elements that are going to be hard. And every job is going to be challenging at times. John Summit, who is traveling the world, one of the highest paid and most well-received DJs of our time right now, he used to be a CPA at a Big Four accounting firm. He used to follow that corporate route. And he basically got fired from his job, jumped off the corporate ladder, and built his entire DJ portfolio, so to speak, on social media during COVID. And even being on the other side of it, he acknowledges that I can be the biggest DJ in the world and it's still going to be hard. And there are still going to be times that you don't want to show up. And there are still going to be times where you're struggling. Now, I'm not saying, again, caveat, okay? I'm not saying you should ever sacrifice your health or your mental health for your job, but this, I don't know, this energy, this vitriol that we're getting from Miss Chappell Roan, it makes me think that if you can't be self-motivated to figure it out when times get tough and show up, because this is not the first thing that she's canceled. I have to relate it back to somebody like Taylor Swift, who, and by the way, I'm not a Swiftie, but she wrote the song, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, because she did it. She was having a broken heart and she got up there and put a smile on her face and performed every single night. And Chappell is complaining about all these pressures and how she has to show up and how she has to be involved. And she's endorsing certain presidents and not other ones. And she's getting all kind of flustered and taking a stand and backing down. And I think about a celebrity like Sia, who is the perfect example of an artist entrepreneur who did things her own way. She wore a freaking wig to hide her face for many years of her career because she wanted to be private and anonymous. And she still put out bangers. And she decided she didn't want to go on tour and she didn't want to be a traditional celebrity, but she wanted to create music. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is that there is no one way to do it. And nobody's out here telling Chappell Roan that she has to commit to all of these shows and all of these festivals and all of these things. She's choosing to do it. She's choosing to speak up. But you get to decide. Like, I decide not to do a lot. And I love how Sia decided to have her boundaries. And I love how Taylor Swift decided to show up for her commitments, even when it was really hard. And I think when we look at some of these traditional entrepreneurs, we think about Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs. And when I think about that, like, I just think about, okay, you're an entrepreneur that created a whole huge corporate system. That's not attractive to me. In fact, I've really kept my company small on purpose because I don't want to manage a huge team and I want to have a ton of clients. I don't want to lose the magic because we're a volume shop, not a boutique shop. But you can look around to find a lot more examples of incredible entrepreneurs who are doing amazing things on their own terms. Like Victoria Beckham, one of my favorites. I just watched the Beckham documentary finally. I know I'm a year late, but how absolutely cute is she and Bex? But anyway, she went from Posh Spice to being one of the most prolific fashion names ever. And she's done it all on her own terms. And I think that, I mean, obviously her designs are great. Her taste is impeccable, but she's doing exactly what she wants to do, even though everybody was like, you're going to fail. You're just Posh Spice. Or what about Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen? They just took $1 billion, or maybe they took $1 billion of investment money. I'm not sure. Maybe they were valued at $1 billion. But either way, The Row is now a unicorn company. And they are dressing the way that they want, smoking as many cigarettes as they want, walking around with the Margot bag everybody wants. And they're doing it all on their terms. And they're not in the public eye. They're not doing a bunch of interviews all the time. They're not freaking out and posting on social media. They're doing things the way that they do them. Or how about Jeff Lewis? Because I'm also on this whole flipping out resurgence. I'm kind of in my vintage Bravo era where I'm rewatching stuff. Jeff Lewis is a nut, okay? But I adore him because he's funny. He makes great TV. And now, of course, he still does Hollywood House Lift, which is a show on Amazon, which is super entertaining if you haven't watched it. He does interior design for clients. He also has a radio show. He's employed by SiriusXM. He has a radio show that he does 5 days a week for 2 hours a day. And so he has a blend of different incomes, right? He has his shows, he has his design work, he has SiriusXM. And he also, how about this? If you want to get dinner with Jeff Lewis, he will let you take him to dinner. You can take, if you're a fan, you can take Jeff Lewis to dinner and have a dinner with him. And you have to pay him $10,000 per dinner. And he talks about it on his radio show, and he gets booked for these dinners all of the time. He sets his price. He sets his access. And if you want it, you can have it. You just have to pay for it. Or how about my new favorite on TikTok, Catherine Watercutter? You probably don't know that name, but she's the founder of Gold Hinge. And you probably know Gold Hinge from Bama Rush. Hey, y'all, my skirt's from Gold Hinge. My top's from Gold Hinge. Roll Tide. She started this activewear brand when she was 23 years old. And today it brings in more than $1 million a month. She was working as a sales rep in Indiana when she decided to start a side hustle, which was making these cute little Tennessee pleated golfy skirt situations that blew up all over the South, and Rush Talk blew her up. And now she documents her journey of being an entrepreneur every day on TikTok. And it's the sweetest, nicest stuff. She has all these pretty athleisure wear sets. Her closet is amazing. And she's just doing what she wants to do. And here's the thing about Victoria Beckham, about Jeff Lewis, about Catherine Watercutter, all these people, it's going to be one in a series of many, because once you figure out how to build a business, it's something you want to do again and again and again. You have freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and then you find your purpose, and then you find your next purpose and your next purpose. So how do you figure out if you are an entrepreneur? Well, you know what? I think you have to try if it's something that calls to you, quite honestly, but it is not for the faint-hearted. So what's the test to determine if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you should be an entrepreneur or not? Honestly, the test is starting and figuring out if it's something that feels good for you. And I think that's really hard to do, especially when being an entrepreneur doesn't feel good all the time. It's not what it looks like on Instagram, even though I'm very conscientious as to not post any fake aspirational girl boss content. Anytime I see somebody on their computer in a bikini, I'm like, no, your computer's overheating and your tits are sweating. And if you've ever been in Europe trying to work remote there, find me on the floor of a bathroom looking for a Wi-Fi connection and having a meltdown. I've been there. It's fine. But I want to tell you my story because I feel like there's a lot to learn in it where I don't know, I want to give you the permission slip. I want to give you the permission slip to try if you're interested, because the thing is no one's coming to pick you. If starting something, whether it's a business, a side hustle, a hobby, is something that's called to you, you have to pick yourself. And the reason why I think my story is interesting is not because it's interesting. It's because most entrepreneurs that I've met have had a similar story as me. If you're a business sending out emails and you're not doing it on Flowdesk, baby, I've got news for you. Today's episode is sponsored by Flowdesk, what I believe to be the most beautiful email marketing tool ever. As a marketer myself, it blows my mind to see janky emails. You know, the ones that are formatted all weird, they're all the wrong colors, and they're coming from brands that I love. And it's just such a letdown and honestly doesn't really build confidence in that brand, if you know what I mean. Don't put yourself in the same situation. Send emails people love to get. Flowdesk helps businesses put their best foot forward via email. They have stunning templates, a drag and drop design system so you don't need to know graphic design or how to code. You're going to be sending emails in minutes, and you can build out automations, landing pages, segments. The whole thing is going to be easy to use, and it's going to look beautiful on both desktop or mobile. It's what we use at AF Marketing, and it's what we recommend for all of our clients. Sign up using our link to get 50% off your annual membership. That's right. I said 50. You're going to go to flowdesk.com/c/oldmoney. Flowdesk is spelled FLODESK. That's 50% off your annual membership. Flowdesk.com/c/oldmoney. You're going to get unlimited subscribers, unlimited email sends, all for 50% off your first year. And you're going to start sending emails people love to get. Okay, so without reading you my full resume, just to take you back in time of how I ended up here, I was very lucky to graduate in 2009, try to get into real estate. That's a joke. It was right after the recession. There was literally no jobs anywhere. So I moved home with my mom to regroup, as one does. And I was doing research. I was literally on probably yahoo.com, not even Google at the time. So like 2011, looking like what industries in real estate are making money, and student housing came up because everybody was going back to school because of the recession. Nobody could get jobs. So student housing was popping off. So I literally walk in with my resume back in 2011. I'm like, hi, will you hire me? I start selling there. I didn't realize at the time that selling apartments meant that I was going to be working in property management, which was not something that I wanted to do. I just wanted to be in sales. I wanted to be in marketing. I wanted to figure out how to get into real estate development. So then I find myself in this job working on site at a property in Davis. And then also I got transferred with that company that I loved. I loved working for a big corporation. I loved the people that I learned from, our leadership. They were incredible. I got transferred to a new property in San Diego to do the lease up there. And that was also very successful. I had the best relationships there. I can't even tell you. And some of the people that I worked for and with at that job 10 plus years ago are now my clients, are now our colleagues, like people that we still do business with at AF Marketing today, which is incredible to me. After that opportunity, I went to work for a real estate developer in San Diego. Again, I got super lucky. What they say about having good management or good leaders, that's what makes or breaks a job, 100%. But in this job, I started with the title marketing girl because they didn't really have a role for me. And now looking back, I realized that not only did I do all of the marketing things that we needed to sell these different communities or different homes that we were building, but I took that company through a full digital transformation. I didn't even know what that word meant. Essentially, I introduced the company to things like email marketing and using a CRM or doing paid ads to advertise and build a list so that we could sell homes more effectively, using a computer to record the tours that we had at our new home properties. Like nothing like that was being used. And I was definitely cavalier. I was definitely, you know how I am, like a little touchy with authority. And as I grew at that company, I went from marketing girl to, I don't even remember, like marketing associate, then to a marketing director, I think. And then eventually I became the vice president of sales and marketing. And while I was in the sales role as a sales manager, I was then in a position where I was quote unquote managing people who had been selling homes for longer than I had been alive. They did not like me very much, to put it mildly. And to put it not mildly, they were trying to get me fired all of the time. Now, depending on how you want to brand that, you can say they were trying to sabotage my career, or you could say they were probably right on because I was probably a brat and I get it. And I was also changing their entire way of doing business. I told them that writing things on cards when people came in or asking our prospects to write down their email address on a piece of paper when they came to tour a multi-million-dollar house was not acceptable. They needed to take the concierge approach, ask the person their name, get the information, put it straight into the computer so that we didn't have any errors on phone numbers and emails. And also you're not asking your prospect to do the work. It's a whole nother conversation. We can go down the path of customer service, but I digress. They didn't like me. And I was feeling a lot of pressure from leadership for them to perform. I was feeling a lot of pressure from myself to feel like I was big enough for my britches. I also had a lot of conflict with somebody who worked directly for me, who I thought was an underperformer. And I embarrassed myself quite a few times in that role by messing up, especially with relationships. You know, I just gave a talk at San Diego State University a few weeks ago to a group of real estate development students. And funnily enough, I always find people always want to focus on, can you tell us about a time that you failed in your career or your job or your agency or business, whatever? People are always asking me that, like, tell us about a time that you failed. And it's so interesting to me. And I have to think about the psychology behind that question, right? Why are people asking me about my failures? It's because we want to contextualize and make it okay and safe to be like, okay, this person, maybe I look up to them or admire them or whatever. Maybe they failed. And so it's going to be okay for me if I feel like I'm going to fail. So we're looking for safety by asking that question, right? But the thing is, I really don't feel like I have like a long list of failures to like, like tell this student to answer the question in a satisfactory way. Like, you know, I didn't blow through millions of dollars of venture capital that was invested into my business. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. But I will tell you some of the failures that I had at this job. And like I said, and I told this to the kid that asked me in this class, the biggest failure that I had was I lost my temper on this person that worked for me and I yelled at them in the middle of the office. Like I lost my mind. I was so frustrated and I yelled at that person where other people could hear. It was an open plan office. Nobody else was in the conversation, but I was loud enough and I made her cry. And again, this person had been in the workforce for longer than I had been alive. And at the time, I thought I was justified. I thought I was right and righteous. And I cared more about getting it done than about her feelings. And I also didn't have any management skills developed because the thing about that job and the reason why I struggled so much is because I got put into bigger and bigger roles all the time, which is great to get experience, but there's also a lot of growing pains as you figure out how to do it, right? So that's one of my biggest failures. It's one of the things that's seared into my memory and the thing that I'm so ashamed of. And so, you know, when you look back at your time at different companies or whatever, like, I don't think any of us would say that we failed at them, right? I mean, I ended up leaving that job because I was totally burnt out. I was so tired from the pressure, and I was driving a crazy amount of like tens of thousands of miles on my car per year. I was in pain. I was unhealthy. I was working around the clock. I didn't have any of that time freedom that we were talking about at the top of the show. I wasn't working 9 to 5. I was working 24/7, and I was working for somebody else and crushing myself during the process. So for me, that was a failure in a sense. And I felt like I wasn't tough enough to withstand the pressure. And I knew I needed to leave. So on one hand, am I saying that it was a failure? Like I didn't survive, but like, what's the end game? You want to stay at the same job forever? Or is it a win? Because all the things that I learned at that job taught me how to run my business today. I'm talking accounting, budgets, finance, sales, so much leadership, management. I learned so much at that job, but depending on which lens you're looking through, you can call it a failure if you want. So I knew about 9 months ahead of time that I was going to be leaving the company. I had decided in February of 2018 that I was going to leave that job after we finished construction on a project and closed out the contracts that we had in escrow. And we ended up doing that. We closed $60 million in 30 days, and I threw a party and I left. I did give my boss 6 months notice before I left. And it was in that conversation that he said to me, "Why don't you just start a marketing agency?" And I thought, I don't even know how to do that. I could never do that. But I didn't quit that job to start a marketing agency. I quit that job to rest and take a sabbatical. And what I started to do 9 months before I knew I was going to leave that job is I started saving money like it was my job. In 9 months, not only did I save $33,000, I paid off 5 figures of credit card debt because my path was so clear and I was so sure that I knew I was not going to work there anymore and I didn't know what I was going to do next. During that time, I flew all over the country to interview for senior level marketing roles with developers all over the country. I went to New York, I went to Miami, I went everywhere, and I got some job offers. And I just knew that I was going to be trading my pain. I said, this is going to be the same show, different characters, and I need to do something very different. So I saved money like crazy so that I could take a break, clear my head, and figure it out. So that's the first big takeaway, is that I did not have a plan. I did not have a plan at all. I did not have a business plan. I did not have a vision in my head. And it was okay. It worked out because I just listened. So this is what happened. Right after I quit that job, I go to Denver, I travel a little bit, I go hiking, whatever, I clear my head. I go home to my mother's house during the holidays, and I have this big idea because I've just spent 9 months going through radical self-development, figuring myself out. I'm in therapy. I'm so inspired. I want to help people get aligned with their mission, their vision. And I say, I'm going to start an app. I'm going to create the best personal development app because there wasn't a habit tracker that I liked. There wasn't a personal development app that spoke to me. There was nothing on the market that was really exactly what I needed. So I said, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to start an app. And I went through it. I first started by creating a pitch deck before anything was ever created to apply to a bunch of different scholarships or grants. And first ones that I applied to was like a FedEx scholarship. I did an Uber grant. I submitted it to like Y Combinator. I submitted to a whole bunch of people in San Diego. And I was just dedicated to figuring out how to build an app. I wanted to be a personal development junkie that had an app to go with it. And so what I did is I researched everything. I made these decks, and along the way, I was figuring out, how do you build an app? And I realized that I was a non-technical co-founder because your girl doesn't know how to code. But I have an idea and I have a lot of charisma. So I'm going to figure this out. So I start going and applying for all of these different incubators. And an incubator is a place where you build something, usually a startup, within and through the guidance of the person that's hosting the incubator. And sometimes they invite you into the incubator in exchange for equity in your company, or sometimes it's just for free, or sometimes you pay. So I paid to become a part of a couple of different incubators. And my experience in it was that these incubators were my business courses in college, but contextualized. I was like, oh, this is what they were talking about. It literally just, because I had something to build and work on, everything started to click. Everything started to come together, whether it was financial projections or how to pitch something to investors or why decks need to look the way that decks do. I figured it all out by building this app. And I interviewed technical co-founders. I had, and when I tell you, a real ass adult, like an adult man who had exited many companies, was retired, but I got connected to him through another incubator or whatever. And he was so jacked about my project. He wanted to come on as a partner and build it with me. And this was like a person with like a mortgage and a family and kids in college. And they were like, let's build this. And I believe in it. And this is going to make us money. And at the same time that all of this is happening, I had taken on one or two social media clients because I was just helping somebody out here and helping somebody out there. And I was just focused on helping. Like, yeah, I can do social media. Let me do that on the side. So I'm developing this app. I'm learning what the words like full stack meant, right? I don't know anything. And I'm doing social media in my 500 square foot apartment by the beach. My desk is an ironing board. I got a roommate also because remember, your girl is saving a bunch of money, but she's also keeping her costs low. So I had an ironing board and I would unfold it every morning, put it in the middle of my living room, and I would pace around and make sales calls and try to get more clients. And I would do social media stuff. And I was figuring it all out on like Planoly. And I had this app. And then I decided, you know what? This social media thing is making me money and this app isn't. And I'm getting impatient and I don't want to wait that long for not just revenue with an app, but profit from an app. I'm going to do this other thing instead. I'm going to do this marketing thing. And so that's the second thing I want you to take away from this is that I failed. I had to shut it down. I just quit. I gave it up. It didn't work. I went through all the incubators. I talked to Techstars. I went through Y Combinator Startup School. I did Focus in San Diego. I did all the reading, all the stuff. I talked to technical co-founders. I figured out all this stuff. I interviewed all these app companies and I didn't do it fast enough. I didn't go far enough, fast enough, and it failed. And so that app never came to be. It was something I put on my LinkedIn that I just like one day deleted. I failed. I'm quoting with my fingers right now, but you can't see it. But I learned so much doing that. Like I said, it contextualized everything that I learned in college. And by the way, the company that I was at before I started my agency, I learned so much there. I had the opportunity to go back to grad school and I decided to not do it so that I could learn from that company and get paid instead. I failed at that job. I wasn't a very successful sales manager. People wanted to get me fired. I don't care. I learned so much and I did great things for that company, for myself, for the idea. I took it as far as I wanted to take it. I don't have any regrets about laying that app down to sleep, but I failed and everybody's so afraid of failing. Yeah, I made merch for that app. I sent it to my friends. And when this app didn't come to be, did my friends judge me and say, oh, Amber's such a loser. Look at that thing that she built and there's no app in the app store. Maybe they did. And it's none of my business because not only did I learn so much, but I also learned that it's not about me. And people can say whatever they want about me and my ideas and the things that I've tried or the podcast that I launched or the business that I run, but it's not about me. I don't care what people think about me because I'm building stuff. And you know that quote, I think it's Theodore Roosevelt that's been co-opted by Brené Brown. But unless you're in the arena, like you really can't say shit. And the thing is that people that are in the arena, they don't have time to judge you. They don't care about what you're building. They're building their own stuff. And here's what I love about being in branding is that you can rebrand your failures however you want. Do you see how I just did? I learned so much from being in all those incubators. And in fact, I'm going to teach you most of what I learned from Y Combinator, which is the most prolific incubator program in Silicon Valley. I'm going to teach you now everything I learned and how I applied it to my business, AF Marketing, and how you can apply it to yours. If there's one thing that I've learned about wealthy people, it's that they value nothing more than privacy, and they're never going to show you all their cards. So while you might think that people are judging you for failing, what you should be doing and what you know you're doing on the inside because you project your brand is you're pivoting. you're doing the next best thing. You're starting another company. Or every time I hired somebody and it was the wrong fit, that could be a massive failure. Or maybe it was, I had no idea what to do with them. I gave them unclear expectations and I didn't hire the right person, whatever. Massive failure or just a redirection. That's the thing about being in the position of an entrepreneur is it's all your own perception. And speaking of perception, here's the other thing I want you to know of just that short story when not even getting into how I run my business or why I do it, but the perception that I've had of myself is what's changed the most. Because when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I had all these goals. I was never reaching them. It all felt like negative and I was always failing or I was never doing enough. I was comparing myself to other people. And I was never feeling like I had the thing that was promised as an entrepreneur of, oh, I get to work less or I get to delegate more. And it wasn't honestly until this last calendar year that I started to really feel the effects of what I've built and having a machine of a company running underneath me. And that took 5 years. It does not happen overnight. And I know you know that, but the thing is the way that I spoke to myself really changed very recently. I would say 2023, I actually started not feeling embarrassed about having CEO on my email signature or my business card because before I felt like I was cosplaying as a CEO. Because a CEO is a chief executive officer and I didn't have any executives. I was doing all of the work myself. And, I started with a tax accountant and bookkeeper, and then I added on a VP of HR, and I have a legal team and finance team and accounting and all the things. And now I have a whole network of people. They don't work for my company. They're outsourced or fractional, but they're all working to support the operations of this business. And I am the chief executive officer. Like I am directing everything that happens here. And when I started to get into the position of I'm giving opportunities to other people to do work for me and I can pay them, I can, through a function of having started this company, support other people to make a good living, make a good salary, and I can get back my freedom of time, my freedom of money, my freedom of relationships, and my freedom of purpose. Because the more I let people do the things that they're great at, the more I get time to focus on what I'm great at, what I'm here to do purposefully, which is create the art, create the podcast, create the content, whatever it is. And everything that I've created here, this company, this podcast, every time I show up, this is just my brain. There was something that happened when I realized that I created a whole ass company that's made multi-millions of dollars from my brain and a laptop. When I say the barrier to entry is low, the barrier to entry is low. How have I built my business? I have listened to what people want from me and I have given it to them. I'm not discounting the work that my incredible team does for all of our clients, but the reality is that this framework, this function, this business, what we do, how we do it, it has come from me. All of the wealth that I have created has come from my brain, a laptop, and an ironing board. It is the most intoxicating thing that I have ever experienced. And the more that I realize that when I'm in my power, when I'm in my quote unquote zone of genius, when I am the CEO, when I am the creator, when I am the visionary, everyone benefits. The clients benefit, the team benefits, people make more money, we grow more. It's what I'm supposed to do as the CEO is to allow people to do their jobs and support them to doing it well. But I spent 4.5 years of this business thinking that I had to do everything on my own. I'm still unlearning that. I'm still learning that there are other ways to be as an entrepreneur. I'm learning still that I can have creative time to record my podcast during the workday because it fills me up and I'm allowed to do that. I have so much 2020 vision in this, but I can see 3 years ago me, 4 years ago me, 5 years ago me that was like begging for a team, hoping that somebody would come help me, figuring it out every step of the way. And what I want you to know is that things always felt out of reach until they didn't. And now I'm back kind of at starting again, where I have these huge, big goals and I feel like I'm starting from zero again. And my new goals feel out of reach. And it just occurred to me recently, like that's the point of goals. They don't feel good because it feels like I haven't reached them yet. And I like that dopamine, serotonin, whatever it is of accomplishing goals. But if you're an entrepreneur in a perpetual state of not having achieved something yet, and I'm just now giving myself grace to really understand that and to really get comfortable of being on the path, because that's the conclusion to this point. There is no one Instagram post where you say, I'm a girl boss, and then you peak. There is no P&L that has the most profit ever, and then it's always going to be better or bigger than that. You can't take a snapshot. Your P&L changes the very next month. Things are always in motion. And so when I think about owning my power in this process and getting really comfortable with the fact that this is going to be a journey, there is no end, I basically said, let me change into my comfies. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it my way. And that has been the biggest gift that I could have given myself. And the last thing that I'll say is that I'm really proud of past me for having saved all of that money, because I've bootstrapped my business all the way through. That means that I haven't taken on any outside investors. I've invested so much money back into the company, namely into my team, but I had to get my money right before I could do this responsibly. Because if I was still in that financial fight or flight mode, or I was making decisions based on emotions instead of on logic or reason or data or numbers, I wouldn't have such a healthy business. So yeah, I did, after I start my business, I did go back into debt. You've heard the story about Poppy and crashing into the Volvo and the whole situation. But if starting a business is something that you're interested in, you must figure out how to manage money before you get started, or you're going to be in for a world of hurt. We're going to talk so much more about this, but I hope that answered all of the questions that you've had about how I started my business. I did not have a plan. I failed at other things, and I failed so many times along the way with bad clients, bad hires, bad contracts, all the things. Things always feel out of reach. I always felt like it was negative until I really focused on, holy shit, I created this thing and you're capable of doing that too. And lastly, that getting my money right before I got into business was the best thing that I could do, because it's given me so much stability to make good decisions for my team, for my clients, and for my company, for myself. So next, I guess the next episode, because we are out of time, I meant to cram this all into one episode, but I'm going to make it another one. How can you do this too? We're going to talk about why your job is your VC, how to leave your job, all the things. I love you so very much. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Let's get into it. Entrepreneurship. Leave me a review, leave me a comment, leave me a DM. I love you so much. I'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Feeling rich? I hope so. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Old Money. If you have questions you want answered, email me at oldmoneypodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on social. We are at Old Money Podcast, and I am at your service. If this episode spoke to you, inspired you, helped you, if you took a single note, it would mean the world to me if you could please just take a minute to rate and review the podcast. And if you're not doing so already, subscribe. And if you have friends who like getting rich, please share this episode with them, even if it's just on your Instagram story. And I'd love you more than Jeff Bezos loves Amazon Prime. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Remember, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not your tax professional, and I'm not your financial advisor. The content presented in this podcast is intended to entertain, educate, inspire, and support listeners in their personal and professional development and does not constitute business, financial, or legal advice. In addition to that, this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services.